the founder of a project that campaigned for girls' education in Afghanistan, are detained by Taliban authorities in Kabul. The Taliban government last year barred girls from attending secondary school and later university, making Afghanistan the only country in the world to issue such restrictions on education. Matiullah Wesa, the head of Penpath, was stopped by men outside a mosque after prayers March 27. When Matiullah asked for their identity cards, they beat him and forcefully took him away. He was arrested for his activities in the education sector. According to Asia Broadcasting Services reports, Taliban security forces detained Mr. Wesa after his return from a trip to Europe. The UN urged authorities in Kabul to clarify Mr. Wesa's whereabouts, the reasons for his arrest, and ensure he has access to legal representation and contact with his family. Sources disclosed to ABS that Matiullah Wesa never worked with anybody else, neither with the previous government. He only worked for Penpath. The Penpath represents an extremely critical movement in Afghanistan. Matiullah Wesa is the second leading educator to be arrested in recent months for campaigning for girls' education. In February, the authorities detained veteran journalism lecturer Ismail Mashal after local media showed him carting books around Kabul and offering them to passers-by. In 2002, when Matiullah Wesa was 9 years old, armed gunmen burned his school. It was led him to dedicate his life to ensuring other children in Afghanistan can get an education. Insurgents torched his community school in Marif district in Afghanistan's southern Kandahar province. Terrified and disappointed, Wesa thought this marked the end of his education because there was no other school in his war-ravaged village. Fearing more Taliban violence, the villagers forced Wesa's father, who was determined to rebuild the school, to move out. That turned out to be a blessing in disguise. We moved to Kabul, where I graduated from high school. Wesa, the founder of Penpath, a community-based education support network in Afghanistan. Wesa's passion for education took him to India, where he pursued higher education in human rights and learned how to engage in a civic and apolitical campaign for girls' education in his native country. Wesa is the co-founder and president of Penpath, an NGO that works to reopen closed schools in the country's rural areas, from the Spin Boldak district in Kandahar to Helmand province, and has so far educated more than 115,000 children. Trying to tackle the widespread illiteracy, Wesa has gone to all 360 districts of Afghanistan over the past decade, promoting education in some of the most marginalized and highly conservative parts of his landlocked country. He opened tens of schools across the country where more than 115,000 students are enrolled. Twice he and his team escaped direct firing at their car as they were traveling in rural areas, and there had always been people who call him name and threaten to kill. Today, Penpath has 2,400 volunteers, including 6 women who give secret classes to secondary school-aged girls. Despite multiple assurances made by the Taliban at international forums, teenage girls are still banned from classrooms in Afghanistan, 9 months on from the group's takeover of Kabul. Many of Penpath's classes are taught in children's homes, with volunteers playing pre-recorded school lessons. In towns where there's an internet connection, volunteers give online classes to groups of girl and boy students. Penpath campaigns for schools and distributes books in rural areas, and has long dedicated itself to communicating the importance of girls' education to elders in villages, where attitudes have been slowly changing since the ban on secondary schools for girls. Wesa has continued visiting remote areas to drum up support from locals. Men, women, elderly, young, everyone from every corner of the country are asking for the Islamic rights to education of the daughters. There are hundreds of community-based schools, mostly at mosques or in makeshift tents, in rural Afghanistan where tens of thousands of children learn how to read and write. Despite its vast outreach, the Penpath network has not received funding from foreign donors. They have personally dedicated everything to this cause. Half of the students in those makeshift schools are girls. Hours before he was arrested last week, as the new school year started without teenage girls, he vowed to continue his campaign. The damage that closure of schools causes is irreversible and undeniable. We held meetings with locals and we will continue our protest if the schools remain closed, he tweeted. Taliban officials have so far not responded to requests for comment. The Taliban government have imposed an austere interpretation of Islam since storming back to power in August 2021 after the withdrawal of the US and NATO forces that backed the previous governments. Taliban leaders have repeatedly claimed they will reopen schools for girls once certain conditions have been met. In a recent speech in Geneva, UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Afghanistan, Richard Bennett said that the Taliban authorities' policy was to repudiate the human rights of women and girls in Afghanistan. Bennett expressed alarm at Matiullah's arrest. His safety is paramount and all his legal rights must be respected. They have relied on support from family, friends and the communities as poverty deepens in Afghanistan. The PenPath founder finds it even more difficult to support classrooms and distribute books and stationery. Children's education is the first victim of poverty in our community, Wesa said, adding that more and more families find it difficult to feed their children. Poverty and starvation threaten to take more lives in Afghanistan than the war took in the past 2 decades, aid agencies have warned. The order against girls' education is believed to have been made by Afghanistan's supreme leader Hibatullah Akhundzada and his ultra-conservative aides, who are deeply skeptical of modern education, especially for women. As well as sparking international outrage, it has stirred criticism from within the movement, with some senior officials in the Kabul government as well as many rank-and-file members against the decision. In deeply conservative and patriarchal Afghanistan, attitudes to girls' education have been slowly changing in rural areas, where the advantages are being recognized. Everyone has the right to education. But in Afghanistan, girls and women have been deprived of this fundamental right. They are no longer allowed to attend secondary school and higher education. This devastating decision threatens to wipe out huge gains made in education over the past 20 years despite major challenges. It also makes Afghanistan the only country in the world today to suspend girls' and women's access to education. The country risks a lost generation as educated women are essential for its development. Afghanistan, or any other country, cannot advance if half of its population is not allowed to pursue an education and participate in public life.